My name is Bishop Castile. On your program is probably Dr. Castile. I wear a number of different hats in both the church ministry and the business ministry. And we have today, I'm going to speak to you about some of the therapeutic approaches to domestic violence and especially where perpetrators are concerned. And then my wife, Mrs. Dr. Castile, is going to talk to you about victims in her program that complement each other. The question that was brought up earlier regarding the psychological, the therapeutic effects and impact on domestic violence or any disorder in families. There is a therapeutic need in the criminal justice system that was discussed earlier. One of the things we do in Tacoma, we've been blessed to be able to work with the justice system, the Tacoma Municipal Court, the Pierce County District Courts, probation officers, because at one time justice did fall harder on African Americans. Most times the option of counseling wouldn't even be considered. It's usually if they were guilty, they would go to jail. So one thing we've done over the past 10 years is work with the criminal system and even to have them participate in some of the training that we do has really assisted in helping to reduce just the automatic incarceration. Some of that has been accomplished because of the different partners that we have in the community. So in my little 15 minutes, I'm going to give you a whole lot about some of the therapeutic approaches and then some of the modes of providing the help. As in my clinical hat, yes, I have. We provide the full range of outpatient services, the psychological services for assessment and treatment, the domestic violence. We in Tacoma, Washington, we have to be certified agency by the state. All of our services are certified. The chemical dependency, state approved, court approved. The parenting, it's a court recognized agency, and anger management, as well as domestic violence. So they all play a role, and I'm going to speak briefly on how we assist clients who come in and how those major areas play a part. One is the pastoral hat, the ministerial hat. We have our Tacoma Ministerial Alliance, and we have an association of ministries, and that is primarily a white pastors. There's some preachers of color, but primarily white. Then there's the Tacoma Ministerial Alliance. That's a collection of black pastors, but it is open to other races and cultures as well. The Tacoma Ministerial Alliance, a big piece that I play, is helping them to begin to work more with domestic violence by training them about the unique concept of domestic violence as opposed to pastoral counseling needs. I think it was the judge who said earlier that the police would say, come in, cool off, go for a walk. And sometimes pastors unknowingly would tell the victim to go put a negligee on or do some other kind of things and it'll be okay, and we'll pray and lay hands on and everything. And they lay hands on that church, and their husband lay hands on when you get back home for telling. So part of what we do, part of what my job has been, and it was easily accepted, is to first start training the pastors about domestic violence, about the concept of power and control that go along with that, but also about the mental health disorder that's connected. Domestic violence is a result of, I think you said, trauma, unresolved trauma. And the perpetrator did not come into this world, was not placed into the mother's womb and destined to be a perpetrator. Perpetrator is a conditioned behavior. The perpetrator is really trying to survive based on limited coping skills, knowledge of coping skills. And then that lack of knowledge, it's exacerbated by the kind of trauma that they experience. And so briefly, I just want to it's and I'm a preacher and I'm a counselor, and I used to stutter. I don't stutter. I love to talk now because I don't stutter. And I'm trying to get through with this in now 10 minutes. But typically, when we see a batterer, and then a victim also, but a batterer especially, you're going to always find there's an issue of fear, pain, and frustration. And unresolved, these issues develop and manifest themselves in anger. If it's fear-based anger, it's going to be more outward. If it's hurt-based anger, you're going to find it's going to be more subdued, introverted, passive-aggressive reaction. And if that pain, fear, and frustration is not resolved, so you get one of those forms of anger. If that anger is not resolved, it builds up to the point that the person feels helpless. Helpless gets you into a point of depression. If you don't treat the helplessness, now you got that depression. And that's more the hurt base, because now it's withdrawn. But anger, depression, is in itself is anger turned inward. It builds up. And if it's not resolved, then it turns to hopelessness. And it's the hopelessness that they act on impulsively. Because then from hopelessness, they go from helpless to hopeless, unresolved, hopeless, anxiety. So anytime you see anxiety based, it's going to be an acting out. So with domestic violence is a number of other things that go with it. You're going to find some PTSD. It won't just be anxiety, but you're going to have we talk about the trauma. The trauma can be, you don't have to go to Vietnam or Iraq or wherever to suffer PTSD. You don't even have to be in the military. You can have war in the bedroom, war in the kitchen. Over the years, you're going to suffer some trauma. So post-traumatic stress disorder. We got to look at some of the trauma. We have to deal with the trauma. And because we are faith-based, while we are licensed with the state to provide the clinical services, we are also faith-based too. And so the spiritual definition is just outright spiritual warfare. We have some that come with some demonic. If you don't believe in God, then you won't believe in spiritual warfare. But just because you don't believe it doesn't mean. Back down in Mobile, Alabama, they didn't believe in voodoo. But there's some stuff be happening because the devil is the devil. And it's real. And so we have to deal with it. And sometimes my wife and I, and sometimes we don't have to know. They don't have to know. Because everybody comes is not Christian. Some are just public. So some of them won't know they're being prayed on. I got to pray for them to protect myself. I bind up them old spirits on them. And they don't understand why. I got kicked out of my house, and the judge did this. I got to pay that. And they come in all irritated and hopeless and leave out. Oh, it's so good. Thank you. Can I come back next week? That's deliverance. So we got a therapeutic deliverance, and we have that Holy Ghost anointing deliverance. That's the beauty of what we have as we, hallelujah. That's right. Give God the glory. So how much, I'm down to what? Okay. And I wanted to talk more about the therapeutic approach than about just the agents. That's why I'm not referring to that now. But we have, in our domestic violence piece, is doors to change. And there are different doors to change. There are therapeutic doors to change, and then there's the spiritual doors. There are a number of different aspects that we can use. And Oliver talked about one of the modalities. And I like cognitive behavioral therapy. I like to help people to begin to see what's happening and how the first thought that comes into their mind. I was a victim of post-traumatic stress. Before I went into the military, I had PTSD. I grew up in Alabama. He went to a Lutheran school. My dad sent me to a Catholic school. Got whacked by nuns, did all the kind of stuff. And so actually going to Vietnam was a treat like I got paid to be harassed. But the issue and the trauma was still real. And then I came out and got married and didn't have some other kind of skills. I grew up with the nuns and the little girls at the Catholic schools. And then I was the oldest son in a Southern family. I was the oldest son, but second child. So I had a sister that bossed me around. She couldn't go to the store without my protection, but she can spank me. That's some trauma. That traumatized me. And I didn't realize that. And until much later in life, I realized that some of that stress that I was dealing with, it came from all my background. And I had to resolve that. I had to take care of that fear, pain, frustration triggers that would get me flared off in a minute, a split second. And until you take care of those issues, the anxiety, if you take care of the intermittent explosive personality disorder, you're talking about that. If you don't take care of those, you're just treating symptoms. You might teach them to be violent a different way, but you won't teach them to drop and stop the violence, because the violence is a symptom. And so they need both. The therapeutic help to understand just those three basic triggers: how to overcome fear, pain, frustration. Fear don't mean like you might beat me up, but fear is, if I don't do this, this is going to happen to me again. I'll get hurt again. You got those two interacting. And so pretty soon, I don't wait for it to happen. I do you first. And so the husbands come home, and last time I got cheated on and got messed up there, so I'm gonna just do this just to keep you straight. I don't care if you did something or not. Why the food? You say it's at 5 o'clock. It's 5:01. Well, you told me to go get it. And they throw the food on. That's not a loss of temper. That's to keep them in that place, to make sure that when I come home tomorrow, it'll be done at 4:30. Power and control. Now, they're doing it because they want to? No. Mental health disorders. And if you don't take care of the mental health, lock them up in jail, 3 months, 6 months, they just get building up some more fear, pain, frustration. They come out, and you have 6 months of pent-up hell that mostly, you always heard that song, you always heard the one you love. Bipolar disorders and domestic violence disorders. They could have written that song. Somebody had one of those disorders. So one thing we had to do is help train the pastors. It's not just a spiritual thing. It might be that, but it is some psychological stuff. So don't try to put yourself in a professional position. At the same time, we had to tell them, secular providers, don't down the pastors. Don't tell the pastors that they're trying to kill the patients. And the pastors feel that the provider's trying to steal the person. So part of what I have done, my wife and I, have been kind of mediators, in a sense, in working and training the community. So that's kind of a very, very thumbnail sketch of how therapy is so necessary. We let them know that you're not a bad person, but what you're doing is bad. It's because you're feeling bad and you're acting bad. You makes it bad for everybody around you. I'm not a bad person? No, you just got to stop acting that way. You might be crazy, but you're not insane. You can learn. So we teach them that. So when our approach is a holistic model, the modality that includes both mental, the personal, the social, and the spiritual. When they come to us, we deal with all of that. That's about 5 minutes I've been talking now? Okay. So when there is, and especially for black folks, and Dr. Boone is right, one of the worst things that a black man especially want to do is go talk to somebody about their problem. And I gotta pay you to? So we gotta so it's actually kind of a cultural thing to help them. So actually getting them arrested, that part is good, because sometimes that's the only way they get into it. Now, once you get them in treatment, you got to know how to treat them, that they can begin to embrace it. Or they might come, but they give you hell. Right. So it's a number of different things. Once you get them, you got to know how how to work with them to get them to see that we're not just trying to trip you, take your money or whatever. We're not trying to break up your family. We're not trying to tell you how to run your family. We want to help you to help your family. To the kids, and especially the Christians, we talk about two things. If it's going to be if the batterer is going to abuse the wife, the mother, they're going to abuse the children too. The power and control does not discriminate. So we got to teach them about when they tell the wife, you got to obey me because the Bible told you to obey me. Submit yourself to me. They forget about this as unto the Lord. God's not going to have you to take abuse. He even freed the children of Israel. God is he said, I'm your refuge and your strength, a very present help in trouble. Not in time of trouble, in trouble. That's all the time. I'm your very present help. And so we got to teach the pastors how to be that godly refuge and strength, that very present help as an ambassador of God. We got to teach them that. And then we got to teach the husbands while the wife is submitting herself unto you as unto the Lord, who loves and protects, who is the refuge and all that kind of stuff. She's going to submit herself to you. He commands her to submit. We got to teach them. But he commands the husband to do what? Love. And then in Corinthians, it talks about what love is. So love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it. And sometimes just giving up the last word is almost equivalent to going on the cross. Give up that last word. So, so it's about a learning. Knowledge is power. And so it's a therapeutic, educational, so we got to get that pedagogical piece in there, along with the therapeutic piece, so then they can learn how not only just to acquire the knowledge, but to effectively apply that acquired knowledge. Thank you.
Wow. I was trying to see how I'm going to follow him. And I think I am just going to go from my heart, my experiences. I started out with Castile Williams and Associates. Actually, I first started out with the school district, working with children of truancy. I had to go into the home and find the children that were not attending school. So I did about 16 years. And through that experience, I also was sent by the school district for some training to work with families on parenting education. And so it really advanced me to be able to really look at the need that was happening within the home. And from there, I went to adult counseling at Castile Williams and Associates, and I had the opportunity, under my gracious husband, to learn how to work with perpetrators. I did that for like 15, 16 years. And in the process of working with perpetrators, I was required to make sure you contact the victim and make sure that she has all the necessary resources and information and a safety plan to make sure that her and her children were safe. Well, in that experience, I realized that in working with African American women, their dynamics were different. And even though I had already been working with them during the faith-based community as well, but it gave me a closer clinical look at some of their psychological and emotional needs. There was a lot of long-term trauma, community trauma. You know, oftentimes African-American women are living in poor neighborhoods, and those poor neighborhoods have very, very limited resources. And oftentimes they have to rely on each other. And if they're a single parent, you know, with the father, the perpetrator outside the home, but he comes in when he gets ready because he's going to come in and so-called give you a little money for food, you know, or you're trying to get some money for food from him. And so the only resource that she really could rely on was her pastor. Well, the pastor, they had the food banks, and the pastor would help you pay your light bill. And so the pastor was her savior. But at the same time, her mental health and clinical needs was not met. Her victimization needs was not met. And the pastor, to the best of his knowledge, thought he was really giving her the right thing in a relationship era because he was giving her all he knew. But what she didn't realize is that there were other resources out there. So when I began to tell African American women about they need to be assessed, they have some kind of trauma. Trauma, what's that? I live with that every day. Taking my kids to the school bus or trying to get to the grocery store. I mean, for them, it's a way of life. And so oftentimes, it's not that they're strong or fearless. They don't have any choices because of the neighborhoods that they're in. They don't have time to get off work and go see a doctor. What's that? If I don't work, my children don't eat. And if they're with the relationship or with the partner or got more than one father they're dealing with, they're just trying to survive. And nobody takes the time to ask them what's going on. And most of these women are your nurses, they're your school teachers, they're your Sunday school teachers, they're all around us. But because we just assume that they're okay because they have learned how to survive. And I asked a question, what is the difference from a survivor and overcomer? Can somebody tell me? I'm asking that question. What's the difference from a survivor and overcomer?
I think surviving is that you struggling day to day. Whereas when you have overcome, have put whatever has weighed you down, you're on top of that now. So standing on top of whatever has, beat you allow themselves to stay in violent situations, or someone who's continuing to allow themselves to be oppressed.
Okay, you got it. You got it. Black women have always learned to survive. Historically, when they were brought in this country, they first brought in the 1500s African American little boys so they can condition them and break them. So when the women came over, they didn't have any protectors. Black women learn historically to survive. They're great survivors. You put them anywhere, they're going to survive. They're going to get out, they're going to make it, but the trauma and the psychological and emotional experience that they have through that process oftentimes is always overlooked. That's why they got to say, oh, black women are strong. No, we just learn how to survive. It don't mean that we don't need help. It don't mean that we're not asking for help. But sometimes after your doors keep getting slammed in your face, oftentimes, they say, well, I got to survive. I do what I did. I do what mama did. I do what grandma did. So teaching African-American women that, guess what? It's okay to take care of you. It's okay to take care of your mental health, your physical health. There's often a lot of medical things going on along with mental health issues because African-American women, most of their jobs don't give them, they don't have insurance, good insurance. And they don't have time to take off of work to go to the doctor. So that affects their ability to do any self-care. And mental health is, I'm just going to pray about it because that's the only thing I know. They don't realize that the body is natural. And your mental and physical, 80% of our medical conditions are stress-related. And that's why the African-American woman suffers so much medically because she don't have the time or the insurance or the support she needs to be able to get the help she needs. And if she's raising a male child, she's going to only raise them to a certain level, not because she's not doing her best, but she can't afford child care. Child care is the older siblings, if there are any, if they're not a latchkey child or whoever's in the neighborhood that's available, that may not be qualified. So oftentimes, these barriers that she faced, now when you come in and somebody say call 911, that's a joke. They've never been out to help me. All she's ever known historically is that anybody, any hierarchy in authority has been used to oppress her. So she's going to be very skeptical, very uncomfortable. And usually, if you do come, somebody's dead or somebody's seriously injured. And because of African-American women are known for high anxiety, oftentimes when they're tested in an assessment, their scores are going to be extremely high. So it looks like they're very hostile when it's anxiety. And so their voice accelerates. They get excited. You think they mean. They traumatized. Learning how to approach these women. I remember the first young lady I met, she was 35 years old. She had 2 children. And the first time, she said I was the first African American woman she's ever met as a therapist. When she first walked in my office, she looked at me and said, "Are you the therapist?" I said, "Yes." She ran out. And I was like, wow, I've never had that to happen before. So she comes back about 5 minutes later, and I said, everything okay? She says, "I never met nobody that looked like me." Once she got done with her program, she said, "Can I stay?" I said, "No. However, if you need me, I'm available." She said, "Nobody never spoke my language. They never really asked me what was going on. They just made an assumption." So when I opened up Hope in 2005, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, I really wanted to be able to focus on a better way to be able to serve this population, to talk to the faith leaders, as my husband has said. So now we have pastors calling us saying, "Okay, we need you to come in. We need you to help us. This couple's situation is beyond our control. We need you to come in." And so what we do with the pastors is we collaborate with them. We don't cast them out of the situation because they're very much a support team for us. When we go to the judges, and but we just went to a judges meeting a couple of days ago where we meet with the courts and the judges, and we give them information. We tell them better ways to address African American victims when they step in your courtroom, how to look at these individuals as individuals, understanding that they come in with all kinds of fears and barriers and been stereotyped. When I go to the courtroom with them to get the protection order, the parenting plan, I walk through the entire process with them. I do not leave them. So we go to universities and teach our young, ambitious college students about the importance of diversity. No matter where you come from, you need to learn the culture of the person that you're serving. You need to get to know them. When my white kids come and ask them, what's your nationality? White. No, baby. You come from somewhere. Grandma may be German. You may have some Swedish. She says, "Nobody never asked me that." Everybody has a culture. Everybody has something that's connected to them, that's passed on. So when you meet people, it's important to know and to ask them about who they really are, and not just look at the paperwork. Because we work with CPS, we work with the city of Tacoma has blessed us with a contract working with our perpetrators, which also gives us a door to work with the victims. We are able to reach the families at a higher level that often many don't have that opportunity. And because we have that holistic approach, we're able to work with each category. African American women, they want to talk about their spirituality. Everybody have a spirituality. If you your spirituality, whatever it is for you, but being able to have the freedom to have that connection and that conversation, realizing that they don't have to feel guilty for leaving that bad relationship. Because oftentimes, African American women feel like if they leave the relationship, they're sinning against God. And that guilt and shame that's attached to it. And we don't even talk about the sexual abuse that is often very common in African American families. The incest, very common. And it comes early. I was watching the movie 12 Days of Slavery, and if you watch how the master had the little girl's hand holding the hand, he was grooming her. When I did my research, I was looking at I think the law was in 1865 where they said a rape of a black woman is not rape because she's property. So oftentimes in domestic violence, she don't even talk about the rape part because more likely she suffered that in those early developmental years. And that don't even come up. Oh, I can say no. What? That's not what she's been conditioned to. So when we addressed this population, we look at all the barriers. that they are challenged with. Am I almost done? Okay. Okay, wait a minute. Good. And so we've been so privileged to work with Miss Sharina James, who is an amazing partner with us. I met her at the Pierce County Commission Against Domestic Violence that she had once had, and she wears double hats too, and now she works for the Department of Correction, working with the victims. And so being able to collaborate and meet the needs of all women, but especially the needs of African American women, is always an ongoing privilege. And now, with that word, I'm going to turn you to Ms. Sharina James.
Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to work with you, and thank you for sharing so much about your work in Tacoma. So I'm just going to pull up a few slides right now. So I work in Tacoma, Washington, which is about 31 miles outside of Seattle. Our population is about 1 million, and the African American population is about 11%? Yeah. And so I work for Washington State Department of Corrections, which is our prison system. I specifically do, I don't think this is going to open up, so I'm just going to talk. See on this side? Okay. So I work with victims. I work through our victim services unit, and mostly what my job is notifying victims of prisoners' release to make sure that they're safe. So what it looks like on a daily basis is I'm calling victims to talk to them about, this perpetrator was sent to, or was convicted of rape, or was convicted of domestic violence against you. And a lot of times I have the whole history. I'm able to look and see how many court orders have been issued. So I can talk to them and have open, honest conversation, or that's my goal anyway, is to have an open, honest conversation about what's going on, what are the relationship dynamics, and what is it actually going to look like when this person gets out of prison? How is this going to affect the victim, their family, and what is the prisoner's reentry going to look like? So like Dr. Williams was talking about earlier, it's really important to have honest conversations. I mean, I'm basically cold calling these people about something that's really traumatic, really, really personal, and talking to them about, I want to get their input. What is this going to look like for you? And what can we as a department do to help keep you safe? And so, when I talk to women, as I talked about earlier, about 11% of our population is African American, 18% of our prison population is African American. They have various convictions. And so I talk to them about, what do you think it is that you need to be safe? Or why do you think this violence even happened in the first place? And for most of the African American women I talk to, they totally, first of all, minimize the violence because, as Adrian just talked about, I think they've experienced such a wide variety in their lifespan that to them it's no big deal. The most thing that they're upset about is the fact that there's a court order and that they wanted this person, their partner, to be a dad, a partner to them, but most importantly, a dad to their children. So if they have children in common, I'm talking to them about what that's going to look like when the perpetrator gets out. And so, I hear women say, I just want him to, and then fill in the blank. I just want him to get treatment. I don't want him to be violent anymore. I really want him to be a dad to our kids. Even if there's the court order, I don't have to see him, or, I'm really still trying to heal from the violence that happened. So I just need to figure out how he can stay involved in our children's life. And so, I had some slides about kind of prisoner reentry and kind of the stuff, the coercive control that goes on from prison while people are in prison and the victims are on the outside, how people can maintain control, whether it's by having family members, criminal associates monitor the victim and their movements. Dr. Williams talked about being disrespected. That's huge because that word will get back to the prisoner, and then there's some type of retaliation either after they get out of prison, or even they'll have criminal associates or family members put pressure on the victim. So that's really important. I'm just going to read a quote here from the Safe Return Domestic Violence Prisoner Reentry Experiences of African American Women. And this can be downloaded from the idvac.org website. But there's a quote in here that really talks to kind of this coercive control. Of course, I just lost the page. Let me find it here. Oh, here it is. Okay, this is a quote from a victim. I'm going to tell you, the biggest conflict is when he's in there and somebody goes up and says, she's talking to someone else. I'm speaking from Shantae's point of view. Because other than that, everything's good. The letters are coming in. I love, I care, this and that. I send him a little money. I take the children to see him. But when I go to see them, all he's talking to me about is, I heard you were out there with so-and-so. And that's a huge conflict. And so that happens not only when the victim's going inside to visit, but also when they come out and there's some type of retaliation. Also, when the perpetrator gets released from prison, there's just that even if there's no court orders and the people are maintaining a relationship or trying to have a relationship, there's that pressure of trying to readjust to the community and trying to readjust to a relationship. So there's dynamics of, dad's back home now, so now he wants to be a dad, and he wants to control everything, and he wants to enforce everything, but mom's been the primary caregiver, and that creates a huge dynamic, an opportunity also for violence to happen. So I had a few notes here on why it's so important that we have these honest conversations. We know it takes women about 7 times to leave. We know a lot of women just don't leave because of coercive control and all the different barriers that Adrian talked about. And so, again, women think it's really important for their parents to have a father, oftentimes for African American women, because their lives have been so impacted by not having a father in their homes. And so I hear them say that to me on the phone. I didn't have a dad. I don't want this for my kids. So whatever I can do, they tell me about their plans to go to court and ask the judge to remove any type of orders just for that purpose, so that person can stay involved in their child's life. Also, there's a dynamic that I've seen recently where children are in their teen years and then they start blaming the mom because dad's not in the house. And that is huge. Women expressing so much guilt and regret for making the report because their adult sons are now becoming abusive to them because they're putting so much pressure on them. Why did you make dad leave? Why did you have to call the police? Now he's in jail. Now he can't come to visit. Now there's a court order. Just all of these different pressures put on these women. And this is why it's so great that I have partners like the Castilles to send them to for mental health care. Now, of course, there are all those barriers that Adrian talked about, like they're working all the time. A lot of times I make referrals for African-American women and they just say, I work in one county, in Seattle, we have horrible traffic, kind of like here. It takes me, an hour and a half to get home. There's no way I'm going to be able to go to a support group or any type of counseling. And so, they kind of have to get support where they can. And a lot of times that's church or that's their girlfriend circles where hopefully they have some positive women. But again, we run into that Black women are strong thing, and they'll talk to their friends, and they'll get that message, and they'll be like, I guess I just have to suck it up and go on, or just keep going through the hamster wheel because my life has to go on. So, in Washington State, we do something called a victim wraparound, which is where we basically wrap around the victim when a prisoner is getting released. We only do this at the request of the victim. It's not something the victim has to participate in, but it is a safety planning mechanism that we use. And so the goal of this meeting is to have the victim invite anyone that they think is a support for them, whether it's a victim advocate, their family members, their pastor. They meet with me, the victim liaison, and then we bring our Department of Corrections staff, whether it's the unit counselor from prison or the probation officer, or we call them corrections officers in Washington State. And we just talk about what it's going to look like when the prisoner gets released. What tools does the state probation basically have to help the victim stay safe? And these are, of course, in cases where there are safety concerns, high risk, high lethality. The victim's expressing, I'm afraid of this person. These are when we do these meetings. And we talk about what it's going to look like. So is there any type of treatment required? Where will the former incarcerated person live after they get released? Of course, we don't want them living next to someone that's fearful of them. Things like that. So we talk about that, but I think this is a great tool that other communities can use. You don't have to have a Department of Corrections running this meeting. In fact, it's probably great if a community program did this at the request of a victim, if they're safe. And of course, if there's no court orders, because You can't, of course, violate any court orders by having third-party contact. At the victim wraparound meetings, we never invite the incarcerated person. They're not informed that the meeting even happens because it's a safety risk. But you could, if you had incentives, do this meeting, like if you had pastors, there's no court order, or someone that's supporting the victim, to talk about these dynamics. What is really going on in your relationship that this violence is happening? Is it a mental health concern? Is it a chemical dependency? What are the issues going on? How can we keep you safe and help this person get some help? So I would like to offer this as a tool to communities to think about what are some things that we can do differently, because not everybody wants to call the police, and that's constantly also what I hear from the women I talk about. Well, if he does get out and something goes wrong, what do I do? Oh, well, you have to call the police. Well, I don't want to see him get rearrested, and this whole cycle starts over again. So how can we keep people accountable without always calling the police? And I think we've heard that through various speakers today, that the criminal legal system is not always the answer. And so having these conversations, honest conversations about relationships, honest conversations about what violence looks like, and helping victims define the violence that they've experienced is really important, because they don't call it domestic violence, they don't call it intimate partner violence, they just think it's something that goes on. So that's really important for people to have these conversations. I think I'm going to end there. If you have any questions, please contact me. Yeah, thank you so much.
I grew up in the military. My daddy was in 5 wars, and my mother was his battalion from Germany to the States. I was born in Germany. My mother had 9 children, and finally breast brain cancer took her out of here. And the reason I say that is because he didn't just beat her. He beat us. When he got leave to come home, and I'm talking about it was always, oh, he's going to kill her. This is it, you know. And we were throwing on heaters. We were burned. We were beaten, locked in rooms. You know, they gave me sedatives when I was a baby. What I'm asking is the level of violence that some of our men have. It's like, for, you know, in those moments when they snap, why is the court so lenient with this, where they let them come back and they do it again? You know, the other woman said that was sitting here earlier, they take them for a walk around the block. My father used to break out of the stockade on the Army base and come kick the door down. And my oldest brother and my oldest sister were a lot of time our savior. Had they not been there, I know she would be dead. So, you know, I'm just wondering, are there any laws in any state? We lived in Tacoma, too. He was stationed up there many years ago. I've lived all over. I'm saying, are there any laws in the military, out of the military, in civil relationships outside, where they can't just go visiting their children if they're going to take them and kill them? We were almost killed. He used to tell her, give me one of the kids and I'll leave you alone.
Tacoma, Seattle, Pacific Northwest has changed as California has changed. And and everybody remember the OJ situation. And so things begin to pick up, but especially in Tacoma, because we had our police chief to murder his wife and then kill himself. And so that father demonstrated the need for the kind of protection. And that was even I think she had tried to get a no contact order, then a protection order. So sometimes it takes tragedies to kind of bring about the kind of safety guards that we need. But I can assure you that Fort Lewis, McCord area, Tacoma, Washington, but because I'm in Pierce County, the Tacoma area, we have just good cooperation with the justice system, the courts. The police are better trained. There's always more. We're still training. There's still a way to go, but it's a whole lot better now. And they honor and treat those no contact orders and protection orders a lot differently.
And also, you know, really teaching victims how to be safe. Because when you tell them they got to leave their home, they got to leave their community, well, that's all they know. And commonly, the perpetrator knows everybody they know. My sister was in a horrific bad relationship. She was stabbed, beat, stumped, burnt, and so it took us a 5-year plan to get her out. But what we had to do is we had to create a strategic plan that her perpetrator would not be able to find her. And oftentimes, if you really, you got kids, they don't want to leave the school. There's a whole lot of combination of things that occur. So even if the woman does get a no contact order, you know, it takes a community plan. It takes the victim to have some really strong support. And oftentimes those bridges have been burned because people are tired. Every time you turn around, you go back. Why and so sometimes those doors become shut. And so that's one of the things I do is I really help them to get a good plan. We have a 19-page safety plan that we go with our victims. We make sure that they have a plan, and we provide them resources. Sometimes we got to send them out of state. Sometimes they can't even be, but that's a lot to lose. They don't want to lose their, if they work in a job, if they finally got a decent job, they don't want to lose it. They got insurance and 401k. So it's a lot. It's a tough process, and that's why they need a community of support that they can rely on and know that's there for them.
And what we did, and I'm not ashamed, we married the same kind of men. And I think one is still married out of all of her daughters. But emotionally, we're torn women. We're living, but I'm just saying, what are some of the psychiatric and psychological recommendations that you have for people that have lived in a family that had a father that was a batterer, who was in the military? Because my father was very proud. He was Master Sergeant Vaughn's, and you didn't mess with him. You bounced a dime off your bed. And if it didn't bounce, you was going to bounce. I mean, it was serious.
It's some, especially with the military. But sometimes when they are just addicted that way, you don't have to even be in the military to have that kind of violence. But when we have that, it's important. That's why we separated the victim program from the perpetrator. She started a separate agency. We have to. I said power is important for the perpetrator. We've got to teach the victim, the person who is victimized, that she's not a victim. But in order to stop the victimization, she has to change. So one of the things, look at self-esteem, and the definition of self-esteem, we use this self-esteem in the sense that I'm no more important than how people see me. Well, if you grow up with that, you begin to see or perceive folks see you as low. And you're going to try to find somebody who, and you become dependent. So that dependent personality will sometimes lure you into trying to find somebody who's, you don't feel good enough for anybody else, but just somebody who's not like them. They might provide the rent, just won't beat me, or they'll beat me, but they won't do it in front of the kids. Begin to compromise. So it's overcoming that mindset of victimization. That's what Adrian was talking about, the difference between surviving. Yes, because you didn't die, you survived, but you still victimized it. And so we help people to become overcomers.
You're asking a question, does the military have programs around domestic violence? In the past, they weren't doing as much as you were talking about. In the past, what they would do is that they would have commanders that expected their soldiers that they were responsible for to be in control of their families. Over the years, there's been sort of an evolution. So I used to do training at Fort Sam, and then I went to Weinheim in Germany to do the training for the family advocacy there, but along with a lot of other people who were doing work around domestic violence issues. And the Department of Defense had a training that they would do, but also an examination of the military around the issue of domestic violence. And so that they're working with family advocacy programs within the military to address the issue. There was a study that was done years ago in San Diego with there's a commander, Norma Jones, that was a part of that, and then Lieutenant Colonel Dexter Freeman, who's now running a co-director of the social work program in Texas, who was responsible for the family advocacy programs around the world. So the military is addressing it. Do they eliminate it? No. But they have different strategies about how they respond to it and confront it. Even in different countries where women who are married to men who've been abusive are from that country, it didn't give them, much attention. They expected local community to do it. They're doing a better job. They're not doing a wonderful job. They're not eliminating the problem at this point, but we haven't eliminated it outside the military. But they are giving some attention to the issue, and have had a lot of experts to spend some time. And I would contact National Training Center on Domestic Violence. There's a woman named Debbie Tucker there who's been doing a lot of work around that issue. And I'd also contact the Battered Women's Justice Project in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they've been doing work on it too.
We just completed a workshop just Friday with the military joint base Fort Lewis and McCord because they combine, but annually they provide a workshop on domestic violence. And we're one of the few agencies too that have a contract with the VA to provide work with PTSD and the related issues, and domestic violence is one of those. So things are changing, and gradually, but they're changing.
And also, because our partnership with the military, we do have a lot of victims want to be referred out because they don't want their business in the military. So we're fortunate to be able to be a referral agent for them. And so they come in and we're able to help them. But one of the disparities that they have is that, most of these women, all their families are in a different state. They only deployed here a certain amount of time. So you only have so much time to work with them before they're deployed. And oftentimes you don't get to finish the services that you want to provide for them because they're going to be moving, or they don't have nowhere to go because they don't have any family here. And, the military salary that's a whole different process.
I just want to make a statement. I'm a retired Army colonel. And the military tends to be almost like the police department. People in uniform protect people in uniform. The case very rarely rises to the level of court procedure. It's usually handled by the first sergeant, who tends to protect his people. The woman has to make a very, very, very strong case and have absolutely symptoms of violence, broken arm, scars, before it's brought to the judicial system. And then there's a diversion program called the advocacy program, in which they basically try to mediate the situation. They try to keep military families together. But the violence in the military is both ways, men and women. Women abuse their husbands also. So it's not just men abusing women, but it's also women abusing men. But the military has had a really hard problem on sexual harassment, domestic violence, and it really hasn't got its hands around how to really solve the problem. And it's really looking to people like you to come up with solutions because, you've got 2.2 million people in the military, and just like in the civilian, you've probably got 20% more domestic violence in the military than you have in the civilian world.
Hate to end our conversation here, but I think please give a round of applause for